First of all, my name is Penny Houston. I'm from Nashville, Georgia. I represent Berry and Cook in Tiff County. And as you know, we're here to discuss the state farmers markets. And it's not a study committee. I'm not even sure it's a regular committee to decide what to do about the farmers markets in Georgia. And as you know, farming has changed so much in the past few years. And first of all, I would like to thank the mayor for rolling out the red carpet for us, and what a beautiful, beautiful assembly room you have. I just look at all this woodwork and I just love it. And it's a beautiful town hall. And I feel like it's a town hall. I think it's named the right thing. And thank you so much, and especially thank to Representative Carl Gilliard. Y'all got a wonderful representative. He looks after y'all, and he is. If you need anything, just let him know. He is there for the people, and that's what he's there for. And he represents you well, and he's a good friend to everybody up there. And I can't say enough nice things about you. Here comes Larry Walker just walking in. Come on, we've got a place for you right up here. I just started talking, thanking everybody. And
go right to there, Chairman.
What a beautiful place! Wow.
Yeah, isn't it pretty?
Nice.
I apologize.
No, I told him you took the wrong turn.
I went too far.
Come on down here and sit back, Carl. We'll even things out.
I got the road shut down to one lane.
Yeah.
It's brutal. That's the worst spot to miss an exit.
Construction everywhere down here.
Excellent.
If we could just take a few minutes, and Representative Gilliard is going to give us a little prayer before we get started. If you'll just bow your heads. Thank you.
Lord, we thank you on today for allowing us to be here and your city. And thank you for the leaders of this city, as well as the leaders that are part of this committee. We ask you to guide us through the information that we'll receive, and guide us through the decisions that we'll make. And we thank you for the opportunity to be in your presence on today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And what I would like to do, I would like to start right down here and let everybody introduce yourself and say a little something about you. You can tell them about your cobblers.
All right, thank you. I'm Russ Goodman. I represent the 8th Senate District here in Georgia. I'm a blueberry farmer. Also, we have the Great American Cobbler Company, which we make fruit cobblers. And so, anyway, I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for having me. And I'm also famous for being Sam Watson's roommate in Atlanta.
I was hoping you wouldn't tell anybody that, Russ. My name's Sam Watson. I'm from Moultrie, Georgia, Colquitt County. I'm a farmer there as well. We grow vegetables there in Colquitt County, and I represent parts of Colquitt and now Cook and Thomas counties there in South Georgia. So glad to be here, and thank the chair lady for putting all this together with Representative Gilliard.
Yeah, thank you. All thanks go to him. He's done all the work. And everybody knows Carl. Do you want to say a little something, Carl?
I'm Carl Gilliard. I'm a farmer in my backyard. I grow sugar cane, sweet potatoes, and I'm a good connoisseur of tasting Sam Watson's good food over there.
And let me tell you, before y'all came, you have to, the 2 mics above active, so you're going to have to have them right next to each other, because you're speaking into both mics. Is that right? So they can hear you. Like you
Yeah, you want to pair them up.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Larry Walker. I'm in the Senate. I represent Senate District 20, which is Middle Georgia. I live in Houston County. Own a small insurance agency in Perry that I started about 26 years ago, but I've also worked in the farm equipment business and have a small pecan farm. Representative Gilliard, it's mighty good to be in your district. Appreciate you having us, and what a impressive new city hall. Very, very beautiful.
Well, I think we've got all the thanks out of the way, except that the city manager, Scott, I didn't introduce you. Thank you, Scott, for being here. And the mayor, I think everybody met the mayor when he came in, and we, again, thank you. And if you want to, we'll just go on and get started. And first on the agenda is we're going to hear from partners in performance. Brett, I think you're the first thing on that.
You got it.
And we're interested in seeing, to give you a little background, the Senate put some money in the budget a couple of years ago for us to work on what was happening in the farmers markets. And we decided that we would finally hire a consultant to tell us, because we'd had study committees and study committees and study committees, and we just about studied it to death, and we couldn't find out what we were going to do. So we hired somebody to sort of tell us, to look at each individual farmer's market and tell us what's going on. So Bert. And one thing too, I'd wish the mayor would say a few words to us. I'm sorry I didn't, and if you didn't meet him, it's Don Bethune.
I'd just like to
And
welcome
I'm
you.
sitting in his seat, but I no means think I can feel it.
I'd like to welcome you to our city hall and apologize first. Our air conditioner is down, and it's all about supply and demand now. So Carl and I shed those jackets pretty quickly. I would just like to recognize y'all, and I'm really pleased that Carl put this together, because the farmers market is something that really needs to be kept in place here in Garden City. We have a number of businesses that operate out of that farmers market, and we visit those businesses frequently, and I hope we can come together as a collaboration, Garden City and the farmers market, and figure out a way to improve it and make it more productive. I think one of the things that's going to really help is what the city manager will share later on about some road improvements that I think is going to be a benefit to the farmers market into Garden City. So I just welcome y'all here. I look forward to hearing some maybe exciting news about how we could make improvements to the farmers market, and it would benefit the community and the state as a whole. So thank y'all and welcome.
Well, thank you. And next we'll hear from the city manager. Scott Robadier.
You're the only person that's ever got my last name.
No, he told me how to pronounce it. I looked and I started to say I didn't have my glasses on, but I turned around the car.
So I'll give you an A-. How about
Okay,
that?
thank you.
What a great day this is. We're so excited to have you all here. Unlike potentially other cities, the farmers market is critical in Garden City because of our socioeconomic composition here. Access to fresh fruits and vegetables, abilities to access supplemental stores is very, very critical. So I can't stress that enough on behalf of the city. We are very hopeful that you all will be successful in revitalizing the farmers market. We will support you any way that we can, and we appreciate the fact that you're even willing to consider that. With that said, we looked at what we could potentially do to assist in the revitalization of the farmers market. I am happy to let you know, as you already may know, that we are working with a developer to improve Alfred Street. There will be a total realignment of Alfred. It will be improved and widened. There will be a decel lane that's installed on Highway 80. And the entrance to the farmers market will be realigned to make it easier to go in and to go out. And that should greatly improve the access for in-laws produce and potentially anyone else that's operating out there. I think that's going to be critical to what you all are doing there. That is in support of the logistics center that will be behind the farmers market, which also could bring some additional activity and revitalization to that area. And so we thank you for that. We thank you for the ability to work with state properties to get that done. I never thought that a deal with state properties could be done so quickly. And so that was quite impressive. And we're just excited about the possibilities, and I remain available at any point, and so does City Council. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, thank you. And next, we'll hear from Bert.
Sounds good. Let me add my thanks to everyone else's for having us here. This fantastic building, and thank you to the committee for giving us another chance to provide an update. I'm Brett Bergman. I'm with Partners in Performance, known as PIP. Lisa Balloon is my colleague who's here with me. We're about a little over halfway, 60% of the way through about a 3 or 4 month process to assess the 9 farmers markets with a little more of a focus on Atlanta initially, and then now we've been covering the rest of them in the state. So we have been to all of them now, and we'll give you a view of what we've seen and what we think. And then over the next last period here, probably up until middle of August, will be a little more deeper dive into, okay, now that we have our hands around what they are and what they aren't, what do we recommend you do with them? And so you'll feel a little bit of that today, but it won't be the full answer reveal, if you will, but you'll get a sense of kind of where we're thinking. And then you'll also see kind of where we have to go deeper still. So that's the intent of this. So we have a handful of slides prepared. Happy to take comments as we go. So feel free to do that. If you're more comfortable holding your questions to the end, that's fine with us as well. We can do it either way. And thank you for your help with the slides. We'll roll through with the next one, the agenda, big picture. We'll start with Atlanta, high level, what's going on there, what we've seen, and we'll go into a fair bit of detail about some of the economics, some of the leasing rates, et cetera, and then we will go from there into the rest of the state to the other 8 farmers markets. So big picture, that's where we're headed. If you wouldn't mind going 2 slides forward, that would be great. Wanted to start with just a couple of things. One is just to level set everyone on the sites that we're talking about. We have Atlanta, which has the terminal market and the farmers market co-located. Augusta, Cairo, Cordele, Moultrie, Macon, Savannah, Thomasville, and Valdosta. And we've been doing site visits, interviews with everyone from the site managers to folks on this committee to others with knowledge of the area or areas. And one specific thanks I wanted to call out was to the farmers market site managers, who have, candidly, a pretty challenging job. They've been absolutely excellent to us, whether it's Rita Davis here in Savannah, to Kathy and Augusta, Ronnie, Cindy, Jennifer, Richard. They've been terrific, and they've been taking time out of their schedules to help us understand, and they've been very open and transparent with us, and we're grateful for that, because that doesn't always happen when you come as an outside consultant to help. You don't always be viewed as giving help, so we're grateful for that. So with that said, let's get into the content. If you would kindly move to the next slide. Thank you. And for those in the room, I apologize for the tiny, tiny print on the screens. I didn't quite understand the setup. So hopefully people who have copies can see a little better. And then if anyone has questions about what I'm saying, feel free to stop me or ask questions. So starting with the Atlanta focus, and again, I think it's important to understand, and most of this room probably does, that Atlanta has a massive terminal market that's a giant kind of economic engine for the region for moving produce. And within that same basic structure, you have the retail farmers market and an element of Georgia Grown, a small pavilion there as well. And I think retaining that in its current setup has some difficulties we're all aware of. We've got vehicular and pedestrian safety issues with the way it's co-located. We've got issues around some food standards and making sure, particularly in the cooler areas, that those are up to par and that we're not causing any food safety issues. And we've got to find a way to drive sufficient foot traffic if it's going to be a true farmer's market. That's difficult in the industrial setting it's in. That said, for what it does on the terminal market side, it's in a very good location. I mean, in terms of access and moving things throughout the Southeast. It's in a very good spot. Sweet Auburn's an interesting example of a more traditional farmer's market that sources produce from Atlanta and then moves it out into other farmer's markets. We mentioned that. It's one we want to understand a little bit more and things we could leverage there. There's a few other examples we're looking at, but I just wanted to mention that one specifically. One of the thoughts around that is, can we utilize other external markets more effectively as retail outlets for the produce that's coming through Atlanta, and try to eliminate or remove some of the challenges of on-site retail. We'd have to work through that as to how do you want to do that exactly. But we believe there's an opportunity to elevate the retail aspect, particularly the Georgia grown portion of that, possibly within that same setting, but you may have to do some additional things, which we'll get to in a second. I do think it requires, retaining retail on site does require significant upgrades. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think you're going to have to be serious about separating the management of the retail side of this and the broader wholesale side. I think commingling those makes it difficult to get a clear view as to what's working and what's not. And if you just take a kind of a business perspective of it, when you have two entities that are very different in the way they operate, it's often better to have them separate management systems and financial systems. And I think there's ways to do that without spending a lot of money on it. But we need to provide a little better clarity between the two. No matter the challenges, I think one of the things we've heard repeatedly and we agree with is that with the Georgia Department of Agriculture's focus on Georgia grown, we've got to give Georgia farmers a place to move their wares and sell their produce. And that's both an Atlanta issue and a smaller farmers market issue. So we're not saying that we should get out of the business altogether, and we believe we have to leverage Georgia grown a little more effectively through these farmers markets, and it may vary by area. But in Atlanta, the thing we haven't gone deep on yet is how do we elevate Georgia grown within the current site, or do we have to do something to physically relocate it? Because I think in its current setup, it's not super enticing. We're not sure, we don't have a deep enough view of the incentives being provided. And we've got a little bit more work to do in actually interviewing some of the larger farmers to understand what it would take to make that more viable for them. Please, go ahead.
But I would like to see Georgia Grown be able to distribute large quantities of their products, not just selling
Yes.
retail. That somehow they need a place to be able to, I feel like, to sell their products at the farmer's market.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
And I think
there's nothing wrong with retail. I like retail, but they produce a lot of produce, and
Agree.
and we need a place to sell it.
I would completely agree with that. We've looked at, so if we're going to move to the next slide, please, which is slide 4. The improvements that it would take to get it up to modern standards. There's been a lot of study done, as has been mentioned before. We're trying not to recreate the wheel and look at all the different work that's been done over the last 10 years that shows the amount of money it would take to get it up to some basic level of standard. And then there's been a plan that shows what a 5 and 10 year outlook would look like, and up to $800 to $900 million that could be spent. We have not kind of dug deep into that and said, yeah, I would spend it here and not there. We haven't gotten to like line item level with that stuff. But it's pretty clear that if you're going to maintain and improve at Forest Park, you're going to have to make significant investment, period. And there are some things in the works: construction of Building T, proposal to remove some of the sheds and build a larger cooler facility. I think all that's must do if you're going to stay in this game. You're going to have to do something like that, which starts to bring to the issue of how do you do that? What's the right structure? And under the current structure, we don't think you're going to ever get successful there. You're going to have to do something different in terms of governance. And I know authority has been discussed, and we're going to get into some thoughts on that here in a second. But we think you're going to have a different governance model, period. The current model, I don't think, is going to work. And we need to increase transparency, increase ability to reinvest and continue to invest in the appropriate things in that market, and then make sure you're holding the managers of that market to account, like you would in any business. We need to run it like a business if we're going to continue to run it. If you look at slide 5.
Bert, is that because the revenue generated now goes back to the general fund?
It goes back to the general fund. It is arduous to get basic maintenance dollars, and we don't know enough about the history of each ask that's been made, and so we don't have an opinion on whether it was appropriate or not. But what seems to be true is basic maintenance and any kind of improvement, even of a small level, is difficult to get through quickly. And when we looked at other markets and other entities that have an authority, that seems to be a much more efficient way to do so. And there are different flavors of that. And so if on slide 5, we start to lay out a couple different ways you could do it, and we will do a much deeper dive on this between now and the next time. But we wanted to start setting up kind of a framework from the current existing state, which is the far left column on slide 5. If you wouldn't mind going to slide 5, that would be great. So right now, we're, existing operations, money flows back to the state in its current structure. Each upper grade requires appropriations approval. It can be difficult to justify lease rate increases, which we're going to get to lease rates in a second, and we recognize that they've been incredibly low for a long time. Part of that is it's a little hard to justify moving lease rates up if there isn't a clear path for improvements. So if I'm going to pay an additional lease rate, even if I haven't had it increased in quite a while, it's reasonable to say that one would need to understand what else is going to be done so I know that I'm paying increased money for a better place to store and sell my product. And right now we don't have multi-year contracts, et cetera. If you were to go to the route of an authority, there's different ways you could do it. You could lease it to an authority. So the revenue here will flow back to the Department of Agriculture. We can specify clear terms and expectations in that. We can allow for multi-year contracts. The challenge will be you need to find an existing authority that's willing to do it. There's an example here that we found interesting with DNR Lodge Parks. So there was North Georgia Mountain Authority was set up, I think, in the Zell Miller era, and they then sublease maintenance, et cetera. And so they're directed to keep 2 to 5% of the revenue for repairs and maintenance. So you have DNR leased to North Georgia Mountain Authority, who then subleases maintenance and keeps the additional funds for other repairs, et cetera. So this is not, we don't have a lot of examples of this, but there is one in our state. Might be worth digging a little bit deeper into that. If someone here in the room knows more about that and there's something there that we don't understand, please tell us, but we're trying to dig into that a little deeper and understand if there's any gotchas there. But it was one we didn't expect to find when we started this, and so it's something to consider. So instead of having to set up a separate authority, we lease to an existing authority. Another opportunity, which is the third column over from the left, is you could join an existing authority. So this would be something like the Ports Authority. So you would leverage that existing structure that the authority has, the management systems they have. It would certainly lower the requirements and time to implement. That allows, by its nature, for multi-year contracts. Now, one of the challenges with that is it's going to have less independence. So there may not be as much independence to do what's right for the farmers markets if you're part of another authority, but I think that's manageable. We'd have to figure out how the revenue will flow, given an additional managing body that might have to be created, and how we would make that transparent and not cumbersome. And we're always leery in creating too much overhead or oversight, and we would have to make sure that that was lean. And of course, we'd have to find an existing authority that would be willing to do it. So the Ports Authority, which already has a relationship using some refrigerated space for customs inspection points at some of the markets, including, if I'm not mistaken, here in Savannah, in Chatham County, at Garden City. Other markets around the country are often associated with Ports Authorities. The Philadelphia one is an example of that. And they used a construction loan from the Ports Authority to help build its terminal market, its terminal produce market. So we think that probably warrants some additional thought. Again, I look to the committee if there's knowledge about that particular authority or things we should understand about that. We'd love to learn that, and we will be interviewing people offline around that. The last is the most kind of cleanest and probably best in terms of running it as a business going forward, and that's to create an independent authority. Well, is it one authority or is it multiple? Do you have all the farmers markets, including the Atlanta Terminal Market, in one authority? Possibly. Do you have the Atlanta Terminal Market as its own authority and its own governance structure, own financials, and then have all the rest of the farmers markets, possibly including the Atlanta retail side or the Atlanta farmers market piece that isn't wholesale, and put that in a separate authority? We haven't dug deep enough to know the pros and cons of that, but we think everything we've seen so far tells us this is something worth a lot of additional analysis here in the next couple of weeks, because it looks like it has a lot of merit. We understand it got close to becoming an authority in the past, and I believe in kind of late in the game that was decided not to do that. We should probably understand a little more about why that was, just so we're not trying to recreate things in the past that didn't work. But it looks to us to be the logical way to run it. If you're going to treat it like a business and allow it to stand on its own and fail or succeed like a normal business would, then an authority structure makes a lot of sense. again, open to comments there if there's people that are concerned about it. An example here is Savannah, Georgia Convention Center Authority is a separate authority, and a lot of the bylaws and the way that's set up would be similar to the way we would think you would set it up for the farmers markets. Again, just determining what you put in and what you don't put in. I think politically that one's a little harder, and it does require, and it can be, a creating of more government or oversight if we're not careful. I think the way, when you set it up, you've got to be very cognizant that the management system and governance structure you put in place is lean and allows it to move and make good decisions quickly so that we don't create a bunch of extra oversight that doesn't provide value. And there are some, what an authority looks like and how the board is set up, which would be one of the key issues, and who gets to determine those seats on the board, how that board operates, how it interacts with the management team, all that stuff, the devil's in the detail there. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the authorities that we have and how they were set up because there was a structure or thing that they were to oversee, whether it be the port or
Right.
the convention center or, you know, the stuff we have in Atlanta, and those were state-of-the-art new facilities that they were
Great
put
point.
Here we're trying to create authority to manage facilities that need $900 million to be state-of-the-art. And so how does that?
It's a very fair point, and I would say let's start with, if it is truly 900 million, we would need to really take a hard look at understanding. If you're setting up an authority to do that, it may be a totally different play where you go private completely and let them decide how to build it. I'm not sure it's 900 million, and I think there's a path towards a lot of improved value with a much smaller initial check. What I'm curious is, do we have any history of setting up an authority in this kind of situation where you have an existing asset but it needs a major uplift? If we've never done that before, that's an interesting point, and I don't know of one, but you bring up an interesting point, Chairman Watson.
Well, if I can chime in, I would think the Jekyll Island Authority might sort of be similar, where they had a need for substantial upgrades and more facilities and modernization, I guess, and the authority was able to get private investors to do long-term ground leases, and the numbers made sense, and now we've got I think the state funded that nice convention center, but then the hotels and all are privately operated and on a ground lease, and it seems to me it's been a real success story.
That's a great example. We will look into that deeper. How long ago was that set up?
You might have some private industry that would be willing to build some of this stuff with a long-term lease, and
Yeah.
especially, I mean, the Atlanta location is so prime, and the activity's already there. I would think that a private business could make sense of doing something there.
It's a great point, Chairman Walker. Two things on that. One is I'd like to know, we'll dig into that more, and I'd like to understand when that was. It was in the last 5 or 10 years, was it not? That happened, or was it longer than that?
It wasn't the last 5 or 10 years. How long has the state had that?
Well, the state's had the Jekyll Island Authority for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd say the major improvements have been in the last decade.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree?
Right.
And I want to build on something you said about the private-public partnership, and it's something you see blossoming here in Savannah and Garden City, which is, I think, a big part of this going forward. And in Atlanta particularly, I think some of this is on the state, and you're going to want to be involved, but I do think the success is going to come from a really aggressive private-public partnership, some of which has existed in Atlanta through Collins Produce and now Phoenix Wholesale. I think that's the ultimate answer here, is it's the combination of those two. Now, I realize the devil's in the details of exactly what that means, but I concur with that comment completely. The hotels in the Jekyll Authority, is that what I heard? They were privately built, and it was the convention center that came through the state. Okay.
That's my understanding.
All
That's
right.
a good example.
Oh, please. Scott. Yeah, please do.
And I think, don't you have some extra papers if somebody'd like to follow along that can't see
If anyone needs a copy, kindly walk to the front.
that can't see the screen real well?
Thanks for letting me come back. Unfortunately, I am not a farmer, but I am a small business person, and that's my background. And so part of this discussion that I think is worth considering is how can what you're trying to do with the farmers market work well with local government? As Garden City, for example, is concerned, we're very agile and flexible. So we are already a local issuing authority for EPD and the State Fire Marshal's Office through a MOU of some kind. Is there a possibility that you can empower local governments to assist you with what you're trying to do? We have a Convention and Visitors Bureau. Savannah has a Convention and Visitors Bureau. Those things could work together in collaboration with what you're trying to do. And no offense, but whenever we start talking about government, then we start talking about multiple layers of an onion that you never get to the actual core of. Where with local government, we're more flexible, and we could potentially represent you all in your farmer market areas to make this a little bit more expedited for folks like Leopold's and in-laws. So I think that's worth a consideration instead of trying to really build the grand prize, which is, you know, an authority out of whole cloth. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if it's ever been done before, but you know, we've had great success with EPD and the State Fire Marshal's Office and representing them within the parameters that they have set.
That's a good,
That's a great comment.
but I don't know if maybe we could do it on an individual basis, but I don't know if some of the local governments would want to take on some of them. But I think in y'all's case, it would be great.
Yeah, so
Because several years ago, we tried to do something with the farmers market in Macon, and they did not want to have anything to do with it.
well, you know, we're already out there.
Yeah, and you're already out there, and you see the potential and what it can bring to your community.
That's right, and you know, we already provide police service, even though it's a
Yeah.
state property. We provide water and sewer,
Yeah.
so we're already on the
Yeah.
property,
Yeah.
whether physically or infrastructure wise.
And I wonder if we're gonna have to do a lot of these different ways. You know, that
Yes,
might-
you
that
may
be
end up
good
with
for
some
Garden
hybrid
City.
approaches that
would
are
be-
better for each location.
Without a doubt.
So yeah, we're a little bit different, and I will belabor the point, but you've
That's
got a premium farmers market that's like a bazaar, shops
Yeah,
and stuff like
yeah.
that in Atlanta.
Mhm.
Well, they're in the middle of a captive million people.
Yeah.
You know, the roadways intersect there, whereas some of these farmers markets are not really on the beaten path. Highway 80
Yeah.
is sure it's a state route, but it's
Yeah.
nowhere near 275 or any of these other
Yeah.
highways. And so you may have to develop some hybrid approaches to
We've
some
got
of
to
the.
treat, I think we're gonna have to treat all of them sort of separate about what we do about
Yeah,
each
so
one of them.
we would love to work with you all if you're willing to consider something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. There are some other examples, and we'll go deeper for the next session on states that have done some very clever local state partnerships around farmers markets. We know of a couple in North Carolina. But so it's a very good thought. And building on that and what Chair Lady Houston just said, I think with the small ones, which we're going to get to in a little bit here, the smaller ones around the state, it is going to not be one size fits all. There are going to be different answers for each one, I suspect, or there might be clusters of 3 that do something similar and 3 that do something else. So we'll have to, that's a big part of the work ahead. And going back to the authority comment, then there may be a bias to having an authority for the large Atlanta market, and again, whether you include retail or just have it wholesale aside, and then you have individual solutions or cluster solutions for the other ones. I think that's a very reasonable point, and I appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we leave this page, so in the next 6 weeks or so, we will be digging a lot deeper into the authority question, and we'll need time from the folks in this room to help us think about what's palatable and what's not. And as we think about the things coming up in the back into this year and changes at the GDA, what makes sense? So we look forward to people's guidance on that. Any other last questions on authority? We can certainly talk about it more, but we're kind of shifting gears slightly here.
I
Please,
have
go ahead,
just one comment. Kind of piggybacking on what Scott was saying, with Garden City, since the inception of this farmers market, they have really been involved. They've had their hands on, and they have a convention bureau that those are hotel sales tax dollars for the promotion of businesses. I think it's a testament to Scott talking about the road modifications and all the above. There's definitely a buy-in. So I think, you know, just for recommendation, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I really think it would be a great idea to have Garden City be involved because of their will. We have reached out to the other municipalities, and they've kind of been involved, but nothing like Garden City putting their hands on it. So
Awesome.
just want to thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, appreciate it. On the next slide, if we go to slide 6, we've been digging into the lease rates, and there's some additional work left, as you'll see noted here on the page. But big picture. So with Atlanta, we're talking about Atlanta markets now, Atlanta Farmers Market. We know the lease rates haven't been changed in 14 plus years, and we understand that raising those rates without a commitment that we're going to improve the property is a difficult pill to swallow. Maybe more than difficult, to be fair. The rates are, you know, considerably below market. We are working to get better comparables. We've got one, as you can see on the page, for dry space. We're trying to get the cooler numbers where we were hoping to have them by this morning. We don't have them yet. But when we get those, we'll send a separate note out prior to the next meeting, just with a couple of pages on lease rates, because we know it's an important issue, and we will provide additional detail. But we know they're absolutely below market. We know there's some resistance to increasing them without a commitment to improve the property. There aren't variations in the rates based on quality, age of buildings, and that defies logic, to be candid. One would think you kind of get what you pay for. Subleasing's been a hot ticket, hot item to discuss, and we have been digging into this, and we haven't found proof positive of it yet. We're not done digging, and we have a couple of calls in, and we have a couple more discussions to do. Is we've heard enough from enough sources to believe there is some level of subleasing going on. We just haven't been able to get our hands on it yet. But we're not going to give up. And I don't think it's anything, maybe I'm not trying to intimate this is nefarious, just we haven't figured out exactly where it's happening in the market yet. And it doesn't appear it's to some huge level, but we don't know that for a fact. And so until we have our hands on it and we can prove it, we're going to tell you that we haven't seen it yet. And if someone, you know, on the committee or elsewhere has insight that can help us there, and we have got many people helping us in the background, please let us know. All that said, please go ahead.
So there is some new space on the market. Is it at the current existing rate, or is it at the new state-of-the-art nice facility rate?
My understanding is most of the new facility is at the existing rate. We're waiting to confirm that because most of it's Collins and Phoenix. We're waiting to confirm that. I think there is the very there's kind of two levels of state-of-the-art over there. The very high-end coolers and so forth, I believe some of that cooler space is at a higher rate, but we don't have the data yet. The dry space, I don't think, is at a different rate. But let me put a bookmark in that, come back and tell you that definitively.
And then are the subleases that may or may not be there, are they charging more than what the department is charging whoever's
Again,
in
anecdotally,
possession?
we've heard it may be more than the rate, but we have not proven it out yet. But we're getting a ton of help from Paul and a couple of the guys at the GDA. So I think we're gonna get our arms around this in the next few weeks, and we'll report back as soon as we have that data. Again, if anyone has any particular, hey, speak to this person, or we know that this entity would have information, let us know, but we have a pretty good list of things to go after. So we talked about the rates and the resistance to changing, and that said, there's a lot of tenants out there who are very clear that they would be happy to pay additional rates. There are tenants out there who would love to co-invest, are willing to invest alongside the state, invest on their own. So there is a energy out there for some major players to help improve that. It doesn't have to all come on the back of the state. And so figuring what that looks like is part of the work ahead. Any comments or questions on lease rates? And I recognize the Chairman Watson's question about the subleases, and again, we'll come back on that.
Any reason or why the new facilities that were constructed weren't raised?
I've got to come back and tell you that definitively. What I've heard in interviews was when the agreement was that a lot of those facilities, I think there was a fair amount of private dollars that were put into it. If I'm looking at Lisa because she's been in part of some of these conversations, And I think part of the agreement was to keep certain lease rates the same. I can't tell you definitively that all the rates, because there's all these different coolers in different sections of dry and cold, are at the old rates. I do not know that for a fact, so we have to come back and tell you that. And I don't think that's gonna be hard to get from David, so.
Commissioner Black has told me more than once in the past that the tenants have put their own money into some of this stuff.
Yes.
But I
And
don't
that's-
know where that's documented, and I don't know if it's,
We-
it's just been kind of on a.
We can get our hands on that.
Random,
Yeah. It was. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And we have heard in some of the smaller markets that the tenants will put the money in for improvements to their buildings. The state takes care of the pipes, maintenance of the pipes, the electrical, the roof, but if they want to make major improvements, it's upon them because the smaller markets don't have the budget to make those improvements.
I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. We should be able to get our hands on and be able to tell you exactly kind of what they spent and what they did, because we've had a very open dialogue with the leadership of Collins in Phoenix. So I think that's a very reasonable ask to come back and say exactly what did happen, because there's some good learnings there about what works and what doesn't. And so we will come back to you with that. We're going to move from Atlanta now, so if there's more questions on Atlanta, happy to take them now, or we can resurface them at the end and talk broadly about the regional and the smaller farmers markets. We'll go high level first, then we'll talk about Savannah, and then I'll turn it over to Lisa, and she'll give you some high points from the other 7 sites.
before we leave Atlanta.
Please.
I'd like to get, if the committee has some opinion on the retail part, before, it seems like that's gonna be kind of a complex issue to solve. And I don't know how much time needs to be devoted to that. I'm of the opinion that that market does not, retail does not fit there. I mean, based on my observation.
We don't believe it fits there either. It's not a good answer.
And the location of the retail, the way they've changed the
Yeah.
the entrance and everything, I can't imagine how many. I'd hate to see the car count. It could be that many people coming.
We've been there many, many times, and I can tell you there's not a lot of traffic.
There's not
Anecdotally, there's
much
not a lot of traffic.
Not much traffic.
Yeah. With a need
Does
to.
that cause heartburn, Sam, with you or Russ or?
No.
No. No, there's so many other feeder markets out there now that,
Right.
that purchase through the wholesalers on the market that, I mean,
But you don't sell
nobody's
it.
gonna drive south, nobody wants to drive in Atlanta anywhere anymore, but
Amen.
why drive from, south to the, to pick it up if you've got a smaller local market there that, I mean,
People, and not that many people, not that many farmers sell on the retail thing that much.
They don't. That's
No,
correct.
Very few.
And the tracking of what is sold is very minimal. It's a lot of cash transactions. There's very little transparency into it, to be very blunt.
And when I went, I mean, they're selling lots of things that have absolutely nothing to do
100% true.
with the farmer's market.
About 80% of it is Mexican restaurant wholesale. If you just look at the space and what it's dedicated to. And that's just an objective comment. I'm not making a statement about that, but that's what
Yeah.
mostly goes on there. So you have a lot of rice and canned goods that go into restaurants that are largely Mexican themed. That's mostly what you see going on there.
I was just gonna make a comment, and I've been to several of these farmers markets, but when I was growing up, the grocery store that I used to go to with my grandmother in Tifton, it's not a grocery store anymore. Across the road, the bank, C&S Bank, which is the first bank I ever had my first savings account, it's not a bank anymore.
Right.
Across the other road, before they built the other grocery store, that was the other grocery store, it's not there. And everything is moved in the town that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so, I wonder about, in terms of investing money into some of these markets, if we really don't need to look at location, because you know, you don't wanna put a lot of money in something that, you know, you want it to be where it's gonna be utilized the most.
Yeah.
And have you looked at that?
Yeah, so broadly, I mean, your comment is very fair, and as we looked across all of the other ones, and I'm going to hold Savannah separately for a second because I think there's some unique things about Savannah, but the other 7 are largely not in the best location. They're tired. There's very little retail selling going on in any of them, just to be candid. Each one has a little bit of a niche where they've kind of figured out how to keep it viable, whether it's watermelons in Cordele or working a deal with Jima at Macon or the cantaloupe processing at Moultrie. There's little niches, but they're really not functioning in the original way they were meant to. To your point, things have changed, and people aren't going there for that. I have heard anecdotally, and I suspect this committee will know this, is that several years ago there was a discussion about shutting some of the smaller ones down, and there was a big backlash, and that surprised me a little bit. Like, who's that backlash coming from? And I heard it was farmers, but we're not seeing a lot of farmers at these markets, and the data doesn't back up that there's a lot of local farmer product being moved. Unless you're a big cantaloupe mover or a big watermelon mover at Cordele, we're not seeing that. And so was there a push to close some of them? Maybe it was during COVID and budget cuts, I don't know, but.
Well, we closed Columbus several years ago and had absolutely no backlash at all.
Gotcha.
I don't remember a single call that I didn't get any call and didn't even hear anything from the representatives or the senators when we closed Columbus.
Yeah. And I think.
Maybe they said something to somebody else, but nobody said anything to me when we closed Columbus.
That's fair. Did you have something you want to say, Chairman Watson?
Well, I was just going to say some of the closures were due to budget cuts because they were a burden and a cost to the
Right.
Department of Agriculture.
Makes sense.
And they just couldn't. They were trying to figure out where to save money, and
Yeah.
they were costing them money, and so I think they were in the thought process of it maybe even giving them to the local governments
Right.
to get them off their back so that they didn't have to foot the bill.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of merit in letting the local folks decide whether they want it or not.
I think so too.
And taking on that burden. I think that's a very reasonable statement.
And then too, I guess I just saw this on your slide that subleasing is not allowed without express prior agreement with the farmer's market.
That is correct statement. And we're trying to find, is there anywhere where there is a sublease happening that has been approved? And we don't see that yet, but we're double checking. So if it's going on in a handshake and a smile probably.
But that's not what the lease says. The lease says the landlord should know, and that if there any money is
I
generated.
understand. We don't have proof of it yet, but we're
Okay.
hearing a lot of anecdotal information that we can't swear yet. But you're correct, it's not allowed per the agreement. That is a true statement.
So back to Atlanta, if you get rid of retail, I think that's gonna clean up a lot of your audit findings.
It is, and then look
which
at
is
it as a
something wanna see happen.
then you can
audit
treat it as a pure commerce engine for produce for the Southeast and let it, look at it on those merits and see whether or not it should be a public or a private entity or some combination of the two. Because there is real economic value that's created out of there, but there's lots of different ways you could extract that value or grow that value. But I do think separating of the retail side greatly simplifies the problem. It's not a retail market. It's not a farmer's market. It is a terminal market. That's what it is. The Georgia grown aspect of this and what impact, if any, closing some, part, all of the smaller farmers markets, I don't have a good view on yet. We as a team don't have a good view on yet, but one could imagine several ways you could help Georgia grown without that. Even if the farmers market were to go away, I don't think it would have an impact on those small local farmers. As long as we give them a place to do what they need to do, there may be other ways to do that. Because one of the things when we were first starting this was understanding how important Georgia grown local farmers and the need to have that farmers market. Well, once you get there and you see it, you don't see that happening. So we've got to we've got to be able to quantify what that means and not just talk subjectively about it. That this is the amount of Georgia grown that's flowing through these places, and I think anecdotally it's small.
Well, this is self-serving. It's gonna sound self-serving because it is, but we have a fantastic Georgia-grown building at the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agri Center, right off the interstate in Perry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they wanted to have a year-round Georgia-grown produce and crop retail there, they could, and it would get a lot more business.
I think it's a
than they're
very
getting in
interesting
Atlanta,
idea.
I
It's
guarantee
something
you.
we've started to discuss.
But maybe I've got farming a little different, but I don't think many of your big farmers are gonna bring 5 cases of cabbage up to Perry to sell in a
I
semi-truck.
don't either. No.
I mean,
I think
No,
if we
and
do an
I-
analysis on that, I think
I
you'll
think-
probably be right.
and I don't think you're gonna find a farmer that'll drive a pickup truckload of tomatoes to Atlanta anymore, because they might drive a semi-truck, because farming
That's
is so,
true.
farming is so expensive now. When you have to pay $1 million for a piece of equipment, not
That's
very
right.
many can, and only 2% of the people in the United States farm.
Fundamentally, for the small farmer in Georgia, are the farmers markets providing a value that's worth the cost to maintain them? That's the fundamental question, right?
But now, I don't think the state should be putting money in these farmers markets if they're not taking Georgia grown, because they're paying the taxes.
Totally understand your point. And I think there are several ways you could leverage Georgia grown to help the small farmer without it coming out of the way it's currently being done. So there are ways to do that. If you look across all the small ones, there are some themes that are pretty consistent. They're largely old and tired. They're located in declining or unpopulated parts of the cities. Thomasville might be the only exception there. That's kind of in a neighborhood and closer to town. Maintenance is limited both by funding and staff availability, and in most of the markets, and there's several examples of this, they figure out how to get their tenants to help them with the maintenance, and then I help you with this, you help me with that. They just kind of work it out, and it's very informal, and it's just barely enough to keep the structures going. But piping, electrical, in most of these places is not in good shape. I mean, it's years and years out of spec. And there are several of the markets have additional land they could use, but they're not really optimized. The land they're using now is more than sufficient, and the value of that additional land doesn't appear to be super high. Either it's in a completely untenable place, or So we mention this just because each place we go to, often we hear, "Oh, we have another 5 acres or another 10 acres," and I'm not sure that there's a lot of value in that, to be honest. We were trying to determine if there was some golden nuggets hanging out there. There's just not. There are just additional acres to the current location, which isn't in an ideal spot. And again, small to no local farmer presence at most of them. And there's varying levels of enthusiasm and entrepreneurship to use the space for other things. I mean, Cordial does a lot of festivals and things out there, and many of the markets do seasonal things. Christmas trees, pumpkins, but there's lots of places you could do that, and that's not really the state's MO, I think. But there are clever market managers out there that find other ways to use the space because the original use of it has kind of gone away. There are some upsides in certain markets. There's Cordial does serve a purpose in watermelon distribution. Again, does that need to be the state involved? Debatable. And I would again just say that part of why you're able to get, even in most cases, break even or some profit out of these facilities is you got just clever managers who find a way. And but it's not the original purpose. I think, what's the one with all the handyman shops? That is that Thomasville? Thomasville. So very little farming going on there, but they have all the sheds are booked, but they're not the original purpose. Yeah, cabinet maker, candlestick maker, you name it. So it's just, it's different than the original intent. We'll do a quick run through of each of them. We'll start with Savannah, and and Representative Gilliard can certainly chime in here, as can Chris and others. There's a real good public-private partnership going on there. You're going to hear more about it today from In-Laws Produce, and it feels like a good template for the ones where you have a strong desire by the local community to keep it and improve it. That public-private partnership, I think, is key to it. And again, I don't want to steal the thunder of later discussions, but that was one of the first ones we went to, and I was expecting to see that in more places, but we didn't see that in too many more places. Atlanta does it, but outside of Atlanta, it was the one that was the most real and the most viable. Again, there'll be more discussion on Savannah later today, but that one was encouraging, and again, it was somewhat unique. let me stop there and let Lisa come up, and she was the point person on most of the other visits. So, Lisa Bloom.
And I'll just do a quick overview of each of them. There's more information in your packets, but in Augusta, the manager there is very entrepreneurial. It's an old facility, a lot of old buildings. A few have been updated. She doesn't have any vacancies because she's worked really hard to find businesses, what she termed as agribusinesses, to rent the spaces. The shed area of the market, where the small local farmers would go to sell, has one that has been selling there for 30 plus years. And she said, after he passes, I'm not sure we'd have another person that will sell there. So that's an example. The market is in a sort of a off the beaten path part of town. There's been some new development not too far away, but it's in a section of the town that's not very nice. We were walking and we stepped on a bullet while we were walking. But the manager there, she's very bright and entrepreneurial, and she's doing the best that she can to put some Band-Aids on pipes when she needs to, and to keep things running smoothly. In Valdosta, Cindy Jersick is the manager there. We had a great meeting with her. Again, an old market it's sort of in a depressed area of town. It's mainly 2 large buildings that house 3 tenants. There was no signage anywhere indicating that this market was a state farmers market, and there was no indication of Georgia grown. There are 2 tenants, Farmer Brown's and Carter and Sons. Their signage very prominent, but I didn't see any indication that this was a state farmers market. And then I guess Pecan is there. A lot of land behind the market. It's not fenced in, just a lot of clear land that Cindy's been able to allow some people to rent, pay her rent to put some trucks and things there. But a lot of foot traffic in these 2 produce shops, but again, I didn't see any indication that it was a state farmers market. Cairo is 16 miles from Thomasville, which I thought was Cairo, excuse me, which I thought was kind of interesting. Not too far away, but a very different market. Again, a lot of land, not very inviting to retail traffic. It's lined by fence and barbed wire. There's a small produce stand there, very small, mainly wholesale business on that market. There's some refrigerated space, but not a lot of traffic. Macon was located near a very busy street, but the manager described it as a declining neighborhood. A lot of open space, not all of it's rented. There's a part-time manager there. They've worked really hard to cut down expenses and are working with a skeleton crew.
It's one of the ones that has a part-time manager.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
Which is a good way to do it, but you don't have a super busy market.
Right. Part of the market houses GEMA. There are several buildings that GEMA has taken over, and they use for storage, generators and supplies, et cetera. They have some rental property on the market that they use for weekend rentals that helps generate income. And then there's an old sort of tired mall space that has many tenants, many storefronts. Half of them are filled with very small businesses. The shed area has 2 wholesale produce sellers, and then that's where we met one farmer who had a very candid conversation with us. He was the only small farmer that was there selling by himself, and he said, it costs me more money to come up here and try and sell some squash and some tomatoes. Some days I ask myself, is it worth it? Because the traffic just isn't there in the market, and it costs him more in gas than he makes by selling a few pieces of produce.
When you were in Macon, did you hear that? Was there any talk about GEMA taking over more of the property? Because there was something in the last budget that caught my eye that I think GEMA's gonna have a larger presence there, I believe.
We had heard that as well. We've done some digging to see if we could find any reference. We couldn't, and then when we were there and talked to Richard, there was no mention. They didn't acknowledge it. They didn't say there was anything coming. Doesn't mean there wasn't something and they didn't share it. I don't think that was it, but we didn't find any any proof of that? They have a pretty good amount of space now.
There's also, part of the office building is used as the Middle Georgia headquarters for the Department of Agriculture, so that's an important space for them. Moultrie, we met with Ronnie Strange there. They're doing very well. They have a good relationship with the city. Again, they don't have a lot of money for maintenance, so they've sort of worked a deal. They'll weigh the trucks for the city if the city cuts their grass. Very entrepreneurial. There's a combination of old and new buildings. Again, not the most inviting location, but they have some bustling produce retail sellers, and they seem to be doing well. Thomasville, again, managed by Cindy Jersick. It's tucked in the middle of a neighborhood. It's a very old facility, very linear, so it's difficult for retail traffic because you have semis crossing your path back and forth. It's quite difficult to move around there if you're not in a semi. There's some small markets there selling produce, and there's a meat market that's new and doing well. But the Sheds building does not house small independent farmers that, pull up in their truck. And the stalls buildings that they have are very old and dated, and they're all rented out, but to like cabinet makers and glass door manufacturers, somebody who has food trucks. So they're not farmers. Then we go to Cordeal. We met with Jennifer Felton. They have, again, an old space. Maintenance is an issue for them. The manager painted the whole market with her brother because she didn't have the dollars to hire a painter. She's very entrepreneurial. They've been working very closely with the Chamber of Commerce, local Chamber of Commerce, to hold events on site to try and drive traffic. They're very engaged with their local community. The market is very busy during melon season. When melon season is over, you have a lot of land with not a lot of being done with it. And that's why they're trying to find different events to house, to drive people to the market.
Now when is melon season?
May and June. May, June, July.
My seatmate Noel Williams just texted me just to let you know that, so I'll make sure I let him know that.
Yes, I think.
They're at the beginning of it.
Yes, they're in the middle of their busy time right now. Any questions on our observations? In closing, I will say the managers are all very eager to do whatever they can to make their market successful. They're trying to be entrepreneurial, but they're working with old pipes, old electrical, leaky roofs, and not a lot of maintenance dollars. And back to the point about how do you bring in tenants and charge rent when the facilities are not in top form.
So just a question, just sitting here thinking, if these facilities are so old and dilapidated and broke down, it sounds like in a lot of places they are full and people are utilizing them. So,
well, it's back to, I think we said it earlier, in a situation where a company wants to make improvements to, they want to move in, they need a place, they see an attractive lease rate, and they work it out with the manager. They will make improvements to their building. The market will help get them to a certain point, and then the improvements that they make within the building are on their nickel.
so hey, this is in a great location and the rent is super cheap. So we'll spend our own money just because we can't afford to build it in today's world in that location.
That's my understanding.
I think that's true. And again, so much of what's going on there is not related to Georgia grown or farming.
Yeah.
You have people there doing cabinetry work, and it's a cheap space, and it's all they need in order to do what they need to do, so it works for them.
And where we saw Georgia grown and a presence, I noted it. Several of the markets have very large signs making, it's front and center. Some of them not so much. And we indicated that in the notes when we saw indication that it was front and center.
Are there any of the markets that are still in the most growing portions? Have, in any of these farmers markets, has the cities grown towards where the farmers market was, or are they pretty much the city's grown away from where?
That's a great, I think they've grown away from it, maybe with the exception of Thomasville.
Well, Augusta, it's interesting. There has been a lot of improvement in the area, but not right up to the market. So very nearby, there's lots of new buildings, but it's the city buildings, I think. The police department has a nice big facility there. I don't think it's in a desirable residential section of town. As I said, that's the one we were walking by, and we stepped on a bullet while we were walking through. And the manager said, you know, on the weekends, it's rough. During the week, I don't have any trouble. The weekends, it can be rough. And, you know, there was no foot traffic while I was there, you know, anecdotal. She said it's hard to compete with the farmers markets, the neighborhood farmers markets that can sell, you know, candles and art and, you know, all these other things, where this is not the model that we're in anymore.
To that point, one of the things we need to do is us understand that better. In these towns where there is a state-run farmers market, what are the non-state-owned markets doing nearby? Are they successful? And if so, can we learn from that? Do we just try let them take it and they do it better? So we do need to be smarter on those, and there are several around the areas we were in, and we just haven't deep dived on the non-state-owned one yet. But we need to understand that.
Well, I know my daughter lives in Rome, and they have a farmer's market on Saturday, and it's real successful, and it's not state-run. But getting back to Savannah's market, don't they have some land behind that farmer's market?
They do.
How
and
many
I don't remember
acres
the
is
exact
it?
number. Steve, do you know how much is there?
It's like 4 acres.
Yeah.
Just 4 acres?
Is it right off the back of where you are?
Right behind us, in between Fawcett, who owns most of the remaining land.
That's right.
Okay.
And-
So that we could do something with that 4 acres?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
road, when they finish building the road
Yes.
through, yes.
That would be,
Uh-huh.
yeah, because right now it's kind of landlocked, but it would be could be
Uh-huh.
very useful. It particularly as they expand and if they move forward on the plan they're looking at, it would be a valuable piece.
Okay. We want to make
That
sure
one
they
stands
don't
out
sell it.
amongst
Okay.
the others in terms of the usefulness.
I've heard some people talking about it.
Thank you, Lisa. That's pretty much it for the prepared materials. And when we get to the final readout, we'll have everything that we've been doing. You haven't seen all the detail. We'll make sure it's in the full final report, each market broken down, details of financials, pictures of it, all that. The next step, so one thing we want to at least tee up here is when we want to do the third and final review. I know there's early August, there's some issues. We're thinking maybe the second or third week in August. So I just want to put that out there. We'll work through the back channel with Morgan and Stuart and y'all to try to get that calendar. But we're targeting that time frame. I just wanted to throw that out there and see if that sounds generally right. Then we'll find the right day and location. But any huge conflict with that? Kind of mid to late August? Okay,
No.
great.
No.
So we will come back in a much deeper dive on Atlanta on multiple fronts. We've got to finish the lease rate analysis, the sublease analysis, understanding exactly what improvements were done, how that was done, what the cost of those were, and what impact, if any, it had on rates, and particularly with Collins and with Phoenix. We will have a deeper dive on the financials of the smaller markets as well. And then there'll be a significant amount of time spent on developing the Atlanta recommendation for retail versus wholesale, authority, not authority, et cetera. So those would be the main work streams here over the next month and a half. If there's anything we're not touching that you think we need to, please speak up now or send us a note and we will add it to the work list and make sure we handle it.
I will just say this, and speaking of you said that the Atlanta market was basically a terminal market, and our lease rates are 25% of what the average would be.
It's about right.
And so, in terms of that terminal market, I would be interested to know, this past year, there was a week, and I'm a blueberry farmer, there was a week when Mexico shipped in 10.75 million pounds of blueberries into the United States in a week, directly on top of Georgia farmers. And so, if the Atlanta market is going to be a terminal market, and if it's needing repair, and kind of what you were talking about, Ms. Penny, I mean, you know, we want, if we're gonna make investments in something, we want it to help Georgia farmers.
Totally understand.
You get what I'm saying?
I do.
And, you know, I would be curious to know, in terms of that terminal market, how much of it is actually benefiting Georgia farmers? And if it's not, and if we are gonna make investments, what do we do to make sure that it does benefit Georgia farmers
Yeah,
and it
that's-
benefits rural Georgia communities, you know?
There may not be a more important question than that one. Yeah, it's at the core of this. We're trying to determine what set of Georgia farmers and wholesalers we should talk to get a better view from their perspective. We've talked to a couple, but we don't have a big enough list yet. So we want a more on-the-ground view of that. In its simplest form, if the terminal market is going to be state-owned in any way, you've got to solve that problem, right? Otherwise, it's hard to look your taxpayers in the eye. So,
Yeah, I mean, we don't wanna be, funding something that's hurting rural Georgia communities.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
100%.
saying?
100%.
How many blueberries, Mr.
There
Rivera?
was
10.7
one week
million.
this past season that the total amount of blueberries that came in, into the United States for a week, I'm sorry, that were produced, in a week was 16 million pounds. And Mexico shipped in 10.75 million pounds, which was more than Florida, Georgia, and California combined.
But
And-
one thing people have got to realize, and I hope they start looking at it, they don't have the same regulations and what you're fertilizing
Exactly.
with and what you're using that are put on farmers here in the States.
That's right, that's exactly
So they
right.
might better start looking at what they're buying.
Well, and honestly, when we look at food security, and this is part of this, you know, we want to help farmers, we want to help rural communities, but we also got to think what role farmers markets play in terms of food security, right? I
Yeah.
know that when these farmers markets were done, it was 1935, 40% of the people lived on farms. You know, I get that today, it's 2%, but 100% of the people still eat.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to think about that in those terms as well. I would
Yeah,
think you'd want to at least look at that.
Yeah, and I know that's been front and center of the thinking here in Chatham County. I mean, it's a big part of it. And we didn't hear much about it in the other places, but it's very much part of the thinking here.
And I'm just curious, and maybe in-laws can speak to this when they get their turn, but if we were to build state-of-the-art facilities and we were to charge what the going rate in the city of Atlanta or the city of Savannah was, can those businesses afford to pay the rate, the going rate in downtown Atlanta or downtown Savannah, and will they pay it? Or is it to their advantage to pay a cheap rent and make their own improvements, because that's more of a installment type
That's a great
deal.
question. I think the answer probably to that is there should be a blend of higher end facility and lower end, so you can serve multiple needs, if you will,
And then
in a
it's-
similar footprint.
And I don't know how it works in Atlanta, but how did Collins get to be the one? We've got a lot of wholesalers on that market. There's only one here, but who gets the first one? Who gets the second one? Who gets this? Who gets that? I mean, what does that look like? I mean, just food for
Well-
thought. I mean,
Maybe in-law can can tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about it when they make their presentation.
And we are, in this next phase, going to be looking at how does a tenant make it known that they want to make improvements, they need improvements, they need more space.
yeah,
What
does
is
the
that
cabinet
process?
maker
Yeah.
in Thomasville have enough money to pay updated facility rent and still stay in business?
No, it's a
Does-
fair question. And the process for that in Atlanta is not clear to us yet as to how that gets articulated, how it gets decided, how it gets prioritized. We don't know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, I mean, not only do they need to support the Georgia farmer, but they also need to be able to pay it if we're gonna build it.
Exactly.
And
100%.
Currently in the smaller markets, there isn't a mechanism for, if I have space available on my market and I need to find a tenant, there is no formal place on the department website or on the state website for someone to advertise, like, I need we have this much commercial space with,
Yeah.
this available. And a couple of the managers said it would be nice to have a certified way to advertise that
100%.
I need a tenant or I have space. A lot of their spaces are filled by word of mouth, or the chamber
Most
is
of it.
approached by a company that is looking for space and then they direct them.
But wouldn't it have to do with their manager of that market? Because I know even locally, we have a local website, and that manager's responsibility is to keep those opportunities or events updated? Wouldn't the managers have that responsibility?
If it falls under them to find the tenants, yes, but they're through the Department of Agriculture. I don't believe there's a formal way or the same process for all of them.
It seems there could be a standard, easy template way to do that, but you're right, it falls to the managers. Some of them do it really well, some of them maybe not so much.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, then, first of all, I'm not sure what order we're supposed to go in. I think Lipo, ice cream,
Thank you.
Thank you.
this is Mr. Scranton Lipo, and I was telling them, I don't know how many people, power is furnished by EMCs, but in their magazine this past month, they had an article about them in the magazine.
Thank you. I thought we'd take a brief overview of the company so you all know a little bit about us and then how it relates to the Savannah Farmers Market and could relate to the rest of the state. We were formed in 1919. Let's go to the second slide, please. My dad and his older brother came over from Greece. And after my dad fought in the First World War, when he came back, they formed the company. And same mother, so I came along late. I was a surprise to the family. So, but I'm pleased with that. Anyway, that's my dad in the picture behind the counter there, and that's our history very briefly. I won't bother you all with reading this all because
It's not showing up on the screen, is it? Is it? Is it
is
showing
it
up
not
on
on
yours?
yours?
We got it.
Okay.
You got it?
I'll just look
Okay.
over here, okay.
Anyway, that's our history. That's the store in the 1920s. That's the store in Gwinnett Street. Next slide, our mission statement. In brief, we make great ice cream, and we are very conscious of the city, of our guests, and of our team. And there's a Greek term where when you invite someone into your business, it's like inviting them into your home. That's how we feel about it. That's our way of doing business.
We have a request if you could speak a little louder or closer to the mics in the back of your, thank you.
Okay, I can speak louder for sure. All right, so let's go to the flagship store, which we opened on Broughton Street here in Savannah. We've been blessed with really quite a bit of business there, which has prompted us to open 2 stores at the airport, which we did after that. There's in 2017. In the next 2 slides, again, I'm going briefly through this so we can talk about Savannah and the farmers market. Our products are all made in-house. We are Georgia-grown members. We buy as much as we can locally. We bake our own cookies. We make our own toppings. We make our own fudges. We do it all. In fact, when you tour our creamery later, you'll see a little bit of that in as much as space allows for us. Our catering, we reach quite a bit. We've been in Atlanta quite a bit. We've catered as far as New York, Chicago. We did the First Lady's Luncheon in Washington. And obviously in the region here, we have product in Atlanta at the Carter Center with President Carter there, who wrote the foreword to our centennial book, incidentally, because of the relationship with a small business when he was in the pecan business and how we started as well. We were at the Hotel Indigo in Vinings. They have some product there. Our wholesale business, I'm going to invite Graham up here, who handles wholesale for us, has expanded exponentially. This is all building up to the need for a creamery.
Thank you, Stratton. So I joined Leopold's Ice Cream in January of 2020. right in the height of the pandemic, and Stratton tasked me with, you know, the downtown's closed. We're right in the middle of a pandemic, and we needed some revenue. So we have totally revamped our wholesale and prepackaged pints, prepackaged single-serve cups to get them out to the community. So we have a contract with In-Market, and we're in 12 of their locations. And we've received, in the 2 years we've been doing it, we've almost increased 320% in our total sales. So the community's happy. They don't have to wait in the line. We're able to reach more individuals. And one of the things that this has caused is, you know, all these new troubles of manufacturing, having to get supply chain issues and more labor. So we've actually almost doubled our workforce as well in our facility. So we are really thankful for the community, and the new creamery would be, you know, a must for us. And one thing I didn't hear, you know, from just listening is the word community. And I think here in Savannah, that farmers market is like our community. And I think that's, you know, one thing to take into consideration is what does it bring for the community. So thank you guys.
So,
Did you have a question?
yes, ma'am, if you don't mind. I just want to ask, do you have your own freezers? I mean, as far as, or do you use commercial freezer space for your ice
We
cream?
built our own.
You built your own?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
when you ship, how much LTL stuff do you do? Do you do a lot of
Well, it depends. I mean, for individual homes, we ship dry ice, styrofoam within a box, any amount, basically different sizes. For larger, we have trucks for that.
Okay,
No.
so you don't use, you don't ship a lot of stuff LTL and having?
No, we do not. We're so concerned about the quality. We want to control it until it gets to where it has to be. Just because we've been asked to be in Whole Foods, for instance. I said no, because once it's there, if a clerk is loading the freezer and it gets a phone call and it melts, it's still going in a freezer. And it's going to get heat shocked, it's going to get icy, and we just don't want that.
The purpose for my question for that is how this involves farmers markets and just things that perhaps Georgia businesses could do to come together. Because like in terms of our cobbler company, I got a price the other day to send 4 pallets to Nebraska, and it was $3,600. A lot of that is because of this. A lot of this is because with all this LTL trucking and having to pay consolidators and things like that, where they come in and, you know, all these folks come together and they finally build a truck to go somewhere. I was just curious how you did it, if there wasn't a way that perhaps Georgia businesses that do produce frozen products could maybe use these facilities to come together and use them for that purpose. That was the reason.
Some companies that have approached us do use consolidators, and we said no to that. It's too important to us that the quality is maintained.
I got you.
Let's talk about production for a second. We built a creamery several years ago. You'll see it. And when you see it, you'll realize why Carl and I have been talking about a new facility. We are jammed. Our fulfillment, the shipping has grown exponentially. Our pre-packs have grown exponentially. We're strangled right now. In the next year, we have to do something. We have been approached by a fellow who owns 9 Line. His name is Tyler Merritt. Tyler's a friend. He has a lot of land, but he's a little bit further out. We'd much rather be somewhere like the farmer's market for a number of reasons. Now, how can we help the farmer's market? We can help it, I feel, in a number of ways. If we build that creamery there, we will build a little retail operation, well, even a tour operation, if you will. To me, the farmer's market, and I used to go as a kid, and my dad would take me out there. And we talked earlier about Mavsovitz, about over there. This was part of Savannah a long time ago. It's maybe not quite the same as it was then, now. Now, okay, how do you improve upon that? I think it's people. It's getting folks thinking about going there for various reasons, and during the off time. Farmers markets, yes, you have farmers there. That's fine. That's part of the function, obviously. But there are hours that's not going on. So what happens then? We could have tours. We could bring Boy Scout troops, school groups. Here's how you make ice cream. And by the way, here's a free ice cream afterward. We can have a retail shop as part of it. The entire farmers market itself, the central pavilion here in Savannah now, and this could relate to others. Carl and I have spoken about this. Put in a speaker system, put in some screens, put in something to do in the evening there. And they're typically, and depending on, and this have to, people will say, and I noted in some of your research, some of the farmers markets in the state may be in less than desirable neighborhoods. Well, we just built a big civic center here, and that neighborhood is going to change. So you can change it. You can change neighborhoods, you truly can, by the right input and influx of business. The other thought, what about a drive-in movie? Thinking out of the box. You know, just thinking. What do you do to create interest in that area? That, to me, is the mission. Then the entire farmers market would brand it as a name. The Moultrie Farmers, brand that name, and then have the subtext of what goes on there in addition to farming. So I think that's our challenge here. I have an alternate career. I grew up behind a soda fountain, but I produced movies. And I spent a lot of years at Paramount and Universal and Disney too. And Disney, of course, promotion for them is the name of the game. And when Carl and I first started talking, and I said, well, we need to build a larger creamery. He said, let's talk. And that's how we started thinking about all of these things. And how do we make the tide that raises all of the boats? So that's a challenge. Any thoughts?
I think you also should elaborate on what number of jobs it would produce.
Well, we would immediately, we have 50 employees now, 55, but that includes some of the airport and the retail. It would be 30 to 40 here in Garden City.
Okay.
We would expand the shipping. We would need some space there. We need space to the loading docks, what have you, which we don't have now. Now it's all forklifts, which is not the most efficient thing.
And I would say when you come to the market, you'll see the area, the proposed area, and how the space is just sitting there. Am I correct? It's kind of just desolate at certain parts of it. But what Ms. Leopold is not saying is the level of Leopold's ice cream is iconic in Savannah and with tourism, and it's good tasting too. But the big thing about it is his connection with the film industry is also being modest, Spider-Man, Superman, all the above. When you come to Leopold's downtown Savannah, you can barely get there. The line is all the way down the road. So can you imagine coming to Garden City with the proper promotion and people coming into, tourists coming into the market on a daily basis and stimulating the economy?
Well, you know, with us, for instance, Girl Scouts, we do a ton with them. And at the original shop, that's where Juliet Gordon-Low went, at the original one. But Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts do field trips. They come, the buses come to Savannah. They could just as easily come to the creamery or to come to the market to see what is going on there. And it'll be yes, it'll be the farmer's market, but it'll be a bit more too. And it's really up to each of us in each city as to what you want to do with it. But I think thinking outside of the box, because I heard a lot about how there are issues. So, okay, how do you solve that one? So that's a thinking there.
Well, have you ever thought maybe the state might need to give some of these farmers markets to local control and let them run it and us get out of the business in the town?
Yeah.
But and as far as the ice cream, I don't know if you are familiar with Barney, Georgia. Well, you build them or you come. I went over there to get some ice cream. It's about 18 miles from where I am, and you've never seen the line on a Monday afternoon of people, and it's just a crossroads, and they're all under the pecan trees. You have to stand in line to get ice cream, and they have a farmer's market right there in the middle of nowhere. And I think that's what people are going to, and people were buying the tomatoes and blueberries and everything that, I guess, I don't know where they came from, but they didn't come from Mexico. They came from the blueberry farmer. But it was,
There's the Savannah Theater here has live theater. Their marketing model is tourists. They market to busloads of tourists on their way to Florida. That's what they do.
yeah,
They look for things to do. Bus can go anywhere.
yeah.
Why not come to the farmer's market if there's an event, if there's something? And it would almost be like Richard Kessler has done down at Plant Riverside, having not quite an event planner, but someone to say, okay, we're going to have this evening, we're having this group there. It's going to be a musical group, whatever, just to promote. Obviously, I'm into promoting. Plus, we do a lot of work with the military. I'm on the foundation board of the 160th Special Ops Air Regiment, Sans Souci with the Rangers. Same thing with military kids, something to do. We provide ice cream for them when they have an event. They can have an event there.
Well, I appreciate what y'all are doing, and I think you brought some things for us to think about.
It's a challenge.
So you have interest in space on the current Savannah
I'm
market?
sorry?
You have interest in space on
Yes,
the
I have.
Savannah
Yes, I do.
market?
Yes, I do. Right now, well, the facility we have, which we're like this, I mean, we need about 15,000 feet, which doesn't include parking or anything. And it's very specialized space because the hardeners have to be minus 30, minus 35, holding freezers minus 15, minus 20. That's all specially. We dig down into the earth to not freeze the earth, so we just put special ventilation and heating below. It's time consuming to build to a degree, but yes, that's what we need. We are interested in the space, yes.
Okay. Is that from a partnership standpoint, or I guess,
I'm open.
however, what's holding you back now? Is there not, if the space is available?
A partnership would be great. Yeah, I mean, I think we could help each other.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming down too.
Yes, well, thank you.
And we'll talk about some.
I like that. I like the idea of a drive-in movie theater. I'm old school. I'm old school. I love drive-in movie theaters and stuff like that. So. Are there any being built?
I don't want to say this on the side.
Gary wouldn't go along with that. I bet Gary wouldn't like that.
Exactly right.
It'd be fine with me.
As far as projection, I mean, we don't use film anymore. It's all digital, and you can digitally project pretty good. Easy to do. I just finished a film. We shot it in Columbus. It's not out yet.
What's the population of Garden City?
The stars, Bill Bridges stars. It's called the Neon Highway. Lee Bryce is in it. For those of you who don't know, Dallas Davidson.
It's in Chatham.
And we're working with Mike Kerr up in Nashville. To do a big premiere there.
Curb Records?
What's that?
Mike Curb? Curb Records, right? Yeah, okay.
He was born in Savannah. His father was with the FBI. They went to LA.
I'm going tonight to see Elvis.
So I guess they could annex it.
June 24th, that's the day. I'm a lifelong Elvis fan, so. All right, look at
When you said driving records, it brought me up. Y'all go to the drive-in. You're 16.
You could probably give it, I think the state could give it
I think
to
there's still one in Jessup.
the convention and visitors.
Thank you.
Probably too.
I think there's still one operation on Jessup, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know
what the value of the property is, but
We go back there, everybody having convertibles and going to drive there.
And everybody lined up.
World will be a better place. That's what we need.
All right.
She's pretty great.
It's gonna make, it's gonna get interesting. News.
I really think that it's really important what we do with this farmer's market, and I know they're interested. And also with the 4 acres need to be tied to it because they can really do something with the 4 acres.
Yeah, we got in-laws.
In-laws, okay. I'm sorry. I was talking off the screen like it was over. I'm sorry.
Save the best for last.
Mr. Steve Kaplan.
This is Mr. Steve Kaplan.
Thank y'all for having me here. I'm the owner of In-Laws Foods, which has been around for 19 years. And a year ago, we started a new company called In-Laws Refrigerated Port Services. We are a certified custom and border protection container freight station where any product that's coming in that needs to have a CBP ag inspection, we're one of the facilities that can now conduct that on the farmer's market. We have problems doing that in that we're trying to get up to all of the federal requirements and GFS, Global Food Safety Initiative, in a building that's my age. I was born in 1951. The market was started in 51 and completed in 53. The warehouse that we operate was built as open stalls. Over the years, when there became less and less farmers, they closed it in and made it into a wholesale facility, which is what we're operating in. We have 46,000 square feet on the market. We have one area that's approximately 2,000 square foot that has 20-foot clear. The rest of the building is 12-foot clear height. Very limiting. We have talked many, many times about moving off the market because of the limitations we have there. First off, our business has overgrown the space we have. Secondly, it's very, very expensive operating in 46,000. We have 700 linear feet from one end of the warehouse to the other. It's very, very laborious. We have 7 electric meters. Georgia Power won't give a discount unless it's all coming out of 1 meter. So we thought about doing the expense of changing all the electrical and putting them into 1 meter, but we decided against the investment to do that. Although we have invested a lot of our money in the market over the years, for a while the market would do the improvements and then increase your rent over a period of time to pay back their investment. That stopped. So any changes that we've made have been leasehold improvements that stay when we leave. We think there's a golden opportunity to save the market, and one of the big reasons is it would be a good relationship working between the Georgia Department of Agriculture and the Georgia Ports Authority. We work really close with the ports. Georgia Port, I know it's not Georgia-grown product, and I respect that, but the Port of Georgia, the Port of Savannah is bringing in citrus, blueberries being another item, avocados. I mean, there's all sorts of produce that are coming into our port. And we're in a position that we offer services that are only available through Americold and Lineage, which are the 2 largest cold storage facilities in the world. We're competing against them. And if we had more space, another building, we'd be able to be a bigger competitor. We're limited. We have people like Nature Right come into our facility, and they say, you guys can't handle the volume that we have. Then they say you have to be GFS certified, which we're in the process, but it's a heck of a lot tougher in a building that's as old as it is. And I know the point came up, would tenants be willing to pay the extra expense of a new building? Without a doubt. I mean, there's an old saying, you get what you pay for. We have cheap rent, we do. But what we have is a cheap building. So I know positively that we're going to spend 4-time minimum on our lease if we move off the market. Or if we do a new building, it's going to be at least that much more. But it's going to save that in efficiency of labor and efficiency of electricity. The savings will, in my mind, offset whatever additional lease expense we have. We've been working with the Georgia Department of Agriculture for a long time. I consider Gary Black to be a friend. I'm sad that he ran for the Senate. And I don't know what's going to be with the Georgia Department of Agriculture as things come. I was involved with the commissioner when he first took office. He appointed a committee to study the markets. That was, 8 years ago, I'm going to say, however many years ago he was elected. And nothing ever nothing's changed since then. The markets are nothing but older and more wore out in the years. So I'm very, very interested in a partnership. I'd met with the Georgia Land Committee 5 years ago about trying to purchase the land or a long-term land lease, and nothing's ever materialized. And my company is at a point, we love being affiliated with the Georgia Department of Agriculture. We'd love to stay on the market, but we're in a point where there's got to be some changes to keep business. It was great for us 19 years ago when we started. I got to say, it was a very big savings as a new business, but as a mature business, we have to have something to operate out of that's more current than a 1951 building from all aspects. I don't have my little notes in front of me. I have to look at the screen. In-laws has committed also, if we did a rough plan. We hired someone to just do a rough design. I think you have it on the slides. That shows a warehouse of approximately 106,000 square feet. And then 2 buildings, one of 16,000 and one, I believe, of 10,000, both of which all the numbers can change on that. We have committed to furnish the kitchen at the new commercial kitchen that will be on the market. It'll be a community kitchen. It'll have all commercial equipment in it. I think it will benefit the state in that food trucks that are in Chatham County now are renting space from restaurants to prepare their food at night because the ordinance is they cannot cook on the food truck. This would be a great income producer for the state to have the kitchen rent out, sort of like a company in Atlanta that's called PREP. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's an incubator of small businesses. They offer full kitchens for businesses that are starting to have rent out equipment. As you get bigger, you can have more space in their facility. We've also, we're not retail, but in my 12 years on the farmer's market, there may be 10 farmers that have shown up to sell product. There's a guy now there that sells watermelons you'll see when you come on the market. I'm not sure he's a farmer. I really think he goes to Columbia or Atlanta and loads up and comes to the market and sells. I think that goes on more than actual farmers coming to the market to sell product. Just doesn't happen. I mean, and I think that's in every city. In Savannah, you have the Forsyth Market on Saturday. You have the Wilmington Island Market on this day. You have this market on this day. If it's the hope to save the markets through increased farmer participation, I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. You just don't get, first off, as we all know, the days of the small farmers are dwindling. You're either a large farmer or you're a smaller farmer that takes your product to a larger farmer for distribution and sales. I think the future of the farmers market is going to be to, as Stratton said, to think outside the box. We would be delighted to be involved and have our new facility on the market, and to participate in all the community events that are there, as we do presently. Any questions, or?
Do you do any exporting or just importing?
All we do is import. And I said, we don't import. We have a facility that handles, we do cross-docking, we do cold storage, we do the inspections, but we don't ever own any of the product. We're just a third party to handle all the USDA and CBP restrictions for bringing product into the port. Last week, we had a load of some kind of vitamin for cows that was needed refrigerator storage that was imported. So we had some of that there. 2 weeks ago, we had some dry goods at our port service building. But now we're getting started with avocados, Mission Avocado. We're handling their avocado inspections. We're doing Sun Pacific, which is citrus. And in 2 weeks, Savannah will have their first South African containers into the port with citrus, and we'll be involved in the inspection. That's wonderful fruit. Halo is the label they use at retail level. We're involved with the inspection and cross-docking of their product.
So, Senator Goodman mentioned this, and I'll ask. We haven't had the opportunity to speak to a tenant, but I mean, I guess being you're in produce, how do you handle your sourcing and your Georgia grown, and where you purchase your products from?
We purchase local. Now, what does that mean? When blueberries are in Florida, before they're in Georgia, we're buying blueberries there. Then we're in Georgia. Then we follow the deal into Michigan, North Carolina, Michigan, and all up. So we're not a company, we're competing against the big boys, but we're a small company of 55 employees, and we're quality. And I can tell you, in my 50 years in produce, the quality's not there on the import. It's just not there. So that's how we separate ourselves from our customers, is the fact that we're a quality house. We give the best service and the best quality around.
But you handle your own purchasing. You don't work with. Do you work with any other wholesalers on, say, the Atlanta market?
We work with Collins on the Atlanta market for fill-ins. When I say if we have a late truck of strawberries that's not going to make it in time, restaurants don't want to hear any kind of reason for not having product. They don't understand truck issues. They understand nothing. They look at a magazine, the strawberry looks beautiful, that's how it's supposed to look. So Collins delivers to us 6 days a week for our shorts. He also does some drop ship on the market. After we unload our product, he has a tractor and a driver that goes and delivers to his IGAs in the area.
Do you know if he sources Georgia grown?
I think he does some, but Collins is huge. I mean, I'd say they're 10 times our size, and he buys, probably a lot of his business is price oriented and to compete, so he'll buy the Mexico or the Peruvian blueberries or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Nature Rock, because I'm a member, before I got elected to the state senate, I was served numerous terms on the board of MBG.
Yeah.
And that's a farm cooperative made up of about 250 American farm families, and our co-op owns 30% of Nature Rock. And Nature Rock has got, our co-op owns 30%, Horty Fruit owns 30%. the California Strawberry Growers Association owns 30%, and a family up in the Northwest owns 10%.
I had no clue
You know,
about
so
that.
we were the first people when we decided that we wanted to be able to offer year-round blueberries in the marketplace. So in 1992, our co-op loaned a guy in Chile $500,000 to try to start planting blueberries so that we could offer year-round blueberries. Time has rocked on. In the meantime, American regulations just gotten worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
Now, Hortifruit goes public, and they've got $500 million sitting in the bank, and we American farmers, who were trying to be able to offer year-round blueberries, kind of created a bit of a monster. You know, we started out as a strategic partnership, and it's kind of turned into a bit of a competitive relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
100%.
so, and that's nothing but just, and it's the funny thing is, and I've had meetings with those folks, and they see the world completely different, and that's why I just want to address this, is because, you know, if it gets to where it's cheaper to grow blueberries in Peru versus Mexico or Chile or whatever else, they pick up and they move.
Yeah.
And they've got Harvard MBAs working for them. But we're American farm families that are trying to pass the farm down to the next generation, right? And so I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's kind of where some of the questions that would come from, because at the end of the day, we don't ever want to get to where we can't feed ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when I look at this stuff, I always think about it, you know, during the pandemic when they were airlifting food into Britain, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We got to think about this kind of stuff in terms of how, do you get where I'm coming from?
Fully understand what you're saying. In my position as a food service distributor, the biggest change over the years is I have not been able to tell my customers that it's out of season. There's nothing that is out of season. And they expect us to have it 12 months out the year. I fully get you, especially when when their seasons are the same.
Is we need to be, when we're not in production, that's fine. Let them
Yeah.
bring in whatever they want to.
I get it.
But we need to make sure that we keep the American farm in business so that we can feed ourselves.
100%.
You know,
I think that's a bigger problem than those of us sitting here in this
but
room.
then there's some of the things I think about retail. Maybe some of these things, maybe some of these facilities, maybe, you know, retail's never going to work there, but maybe some of these facilities could help, that we could have cattle farmers in Georgia come together and build a processing plant, and we're selling ribeye steaks in Atlanta with a Georgia grown logo on them or whatever. You get what I'm saying?
100%.
When you talk about thinking out of the box, that's the kind of stuff that, and you know.
And there's becoming more and more small beef processors. I mean, I'm running into them. I met one the other day that talked to me, Zipper, wanted to know if I had freezer space. He's starting to butcher cattle. He's not doing it. He's going to one of the 2 places in the area that are licensed to slaughter. I mean, that's a great idea, because there are becoming a lot more. Those guys are at the farmers market selling their beef every week.
Well, and look at the pork, we don't have a pork processing plant
No,
in Georgia, a big one, do we?
no, we don't.
Moultrie and Thomasville both have small meat processing plants on the market. One quick thing on Collins, they do absolutely push
Moultrie has
Georgia
one?
grown, and it's actually in their marketing material.
Are
Can't tell
you
you what percentage it's Georgia grown, but Collins, you asked him about Collins.
No, what kind of meat processing plant do they have in Moultrie on Farmers Market?
You talking about Thompson Farms?
We have to look at the name. There was one.
There's
It's
a
in
market,
Dixie.
he said they were working on it to improve their facility to do some processing.
They're not huge, don't get us wrong, but in both cases, it was a retail shop with a small processing operation nearby. But if we need more detail on that, we can dig in.
So, and Steve, that's off our screen, but I'm assuming that drawing there, that's to accommodate both of your operations,
Yes,
the produce
absolutely.
side and the inspections, CBP stuff. all that
Right
you
now,
talk-
I'm operating them both under 46,000 square foot. When we were approached by the Georgia Department of Agriculture to see if we had any interest in becoming a container freight station, because a lot of the importers didn't want to do business with Americold, because Americold and Walmart are real tight. And if you're coming in with your 5 containers and there's 50 Walmart containers, you just don't get inspected for a week. So there were a lot of people there. We're working really close with a company that's located in Lyons called Georgia Fresh Pack, Ricky Mitchell. He packs citrus. He is a packing house. He packs citrus. He even did some Vidalia onions this year because he had no citrus going through. But for his business to succeed, he was in with the Department of Agriculture when they approached us, do we have any space that we could allocate for a bonded warehouse to work with the port? And we had space that we weren't using this is another case. We spent close to $1 million in refrigeration to make all of this space available for our refrigerated port services. We had to dig a ditch in to be able to pull trucks in because the height, obviously, of a building that was built in 1951 doesn't meet current height for trucks to back in. So we have to dig like a pit for the truck to be at the right level. We spent the money to do that. I mean, we need to do it for our business. So, you know, there was no way I was going to. I know the Georgia Department is. You can't get money to fix a roof leak. I mean, it is really pretty bad as far as the condition of the buildings. And I'm gonna say something. Friends tell me that I speak too much, but all the money stays in Atlanta. And I get it. Atlanta makes the most money at the market. But if you're going to have 9 markets, it's got to be some balance to keep the other markets viable. And it hasn't been. I mean, the office now is 1 person. It used to be 3 people. I'm talking about the farmers market office. They used to do a hell of a truck business, scale business. Very little now. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have changed over the years, some of them uncontrollable, but some of them controllable. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've had Paul Thompson on the phone, you know, begging to get something fixed at the market. And usually it ends up with, well, I could probably get $4,999 real quick. I guess there's a $5,000 PO limit or something, I'm guessing. So if it's a $20,000 project, he can give us $49.99 to help us. It's gotten rough. It's real rough. And again, we're not going into this, as I think most other tenants, we're not going into this thinking we're going to have the same $3 a square foot rate. No. No, we know if we're in a new building, we're going to pay new rates.
But in most cases, because you've been at this a lot, if we had a new building and if it was in the same place that it's at now across the state, is that a good thing, or would we be better off if we were, you know, to move forward and invest in new facilities, that we invest in? I know with you it's different because you're at the port, but I'm talking about in terms across the state, that we invest where they'll be utilized the most.
I don't, if you're thinking as far as utilizing as far as retailers, I don't know. My personal opinion is if you had a retail market in a prime location, I don't know if you could make it. I mean, it's just not the current thought. I mean, I grew up, you know, my parents, we'd go to the farmer's market and we'd come home, there'd be 1 TV, 1 telephone. We'd sit in the living room watching TV and shucking corn or butter beans or whatever. That's not going to happen anymore. They want to open up the package and have them already ready to eat. We're in a, right now, kind of a world.
Well,
I mean,
and we've talked about this in some of our meetings, but we have these markets and we have this space, but there's already structures there. So we've got to tear all that stuff down, get all that out of the way so that we can do that or do whatever y'all want to do. And so it's kind of like we're having to pay for it twice, or you buy a piece of land somewhere and you just start over from scratch and you build it one time, and it's state of the art.
That's why one of the things I had suggested years ago was either a partnership or a long-term land lease. Department of Agriculture, I'm told, is limited to a 25-year land lease. And I'm not going to put $10 million investment on ground for 25 years. Come on. Other departments can do longer, but for some reason, the Department of Agriculture cannot do long-term land leases, because that was my first suggestion. don't want to sell the property, talk to me about a land lease. But that never could happen based on the regulations that are in place for the length. I know other departments of the state enter into 100-year land leases or 50-year land leases.
We'll check into that.
I wonder if it's because they're authorities, that authorities can do that when the state can't.
Yeah.
I can't answer that, but I ran it all the way up the tree and got Paul to get with Commissioner and then get Matt Kalinsky involved, and 25 as far as they can go without some act changing it.
Okay. Any other questions? Does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Scott, I hate to call you by your first name, but your last name's a little hard to remember.
You're probably regretting that you invited me at this point. So
No, not a bit.
I will just say to the Georgia Grown initiative, I understand completely the importance of Georgia Grown, but I think that there's some carryover, because what we do know is entrepreneurship is Georgia Grown also. And I think there's a very, very good opportunity here, like I was, like Leopold was, like Mr. Kaplan was. I started my business in 700 square foot, and my rent was the most expensive thing that I had to pay. And I think that there's an opportunity there for flex space for small business, so that you could be the incubus of someone who has a dream, who doesn't have a lot of money, who is able to open up at a Georgia farmer's market, establish their core business. I was in the uniform business, and so I had to start small, and then I got the Savannah police contract, and things grew and happened. But the access to affordable leases is very difficult today, because commercial building is not the thing right now. It's multifamily and other things. And so even if it was a 1,500 square foot concept where you had flex space for people to start trades or candle making or soap making or something like that, because I think what's missing here is the core of the farmer's market. What pays the bills? Because you're able to offer the civic functions, which don't pay the bills, if you've got the core surrounding the property that actually keeps the lights on, makes a profit, keeps the staff employed, things like that. And so the civic component to the farmer's market is never going to pay the bills. And so I would just ask that you consider flex space for small business.
Well, and in my opinion on that, I can't speak for the committee, but I mean, that's not the role of the Department of Agriculture. That's the role of the economic development people within our state and with our local governments. The Department of Agriculture is supposed to make sure that Georgia agriculture thrives and grows, and that there's incubator space for those Georgia farmers, so those small business people can
Right.
stay in business like myself, which it's becoming harder and harder every day. But incubator space under the Department of Agriculture is not what they need to be doing. They need to be focusing on Georgia grown and selling Georgia grown products and growing Georgia agriculture. Just
And maybe if we have to do that, maybe it needs to be moved to another department out of agriculture, or back to the communities.
Yeah, because I think we've established, unfortunately, that the enticements or inducements for local farmers to set up at the farmers market, that's unfortunately, that is dwindling. And so what keeps these markets moving is, are we now looking at a different way of approaching the longevity of these markets by saying we want farmers to still have access? I did not know until recently that any farmer can show up and sell produce at the farmers market. I had no idea, because there's never anyone out there, and I thought perhaps it was the prices that were restrictive. Apparently it's free. And so if you want to continue these properties and you want to continue to have opportunities for local farmers to sell their wares, what's going to keep the lights on and pay the bills? Just a general idea. Thank you again, and I will not say anything else.
No, thank you. Thank
You're
you.
good.
You brought some good ideas. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other comments? But I think y'all gotten us a lot to think about and had some great ideas, and I appreciate y'all's participation. And I'm sure y'all will be hearing back from us soon. But thank you, and I think now we're supposed to go into Leopold ice cream and in-laws produce and what?
Babe's Barbecue.
And Page Barbecue. Okay, we're going to the barbecue place first.